Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Monchetti.
Our headlines today. France is added to the UK's quarantine list, along with the Netherlands and Malta, as tourists are told they'll have to self-isolate for 14 days when they get home.
Up to 500,000 British tourists are thought to be in France right now. They face a scramble to get home on flights, ferries and here on the Eurostar at St Pancras before the new rules come into force at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Anger grows over A-levels as the government faces calls for an urgent review of this year's results.
Lockdown is eased in England with beauticians, bowling alleys and small weddings all able to resume this weekend.
And in sport, there's not much social distancing going on, but after 5 months away, it's finally safe for Rugby Union's English Premiership to return tonight. I've been to see how it's been going in training.
We'll meet the sisters who kept their World War II code-breaking a secret from each other for decades, as ahead of victory over Japan Day, they're honoured for their efforts.
Good morning. It's a mixed day today, still humid in the south with scattered showers and thunderstorms, drier towards the north, and for all of us the heatwave is now gradually starting to ease. I'll have all the details throughout this morning's programme.
Good morning. It's Friday, August the 14th. Our main story this morning. People arriving in the UK from France, Malta and the Netherlands will be required to self-isolate for 14 days from tomorrow, following a late-night announcement by the government.
With up to 500,000 British tourists thought to be in France alone, the deadline could see a rush to ports and airports over the next 24 hours from holidaymakers desperate to avoid quarantine. Our news correspondent Caroline Davies has more.
The UK's second most popular holiday destination will, from Saturday, become more complicated to visit. France joins the list of countries where any UK visitor must self-isolate for 2 weeks on their return.
We're announcing that there will now be quarantine brought in for a number of other locations, now including France, Holland and some others. And that's because we've absolutely worked so hard to make sure that we're keeping our numbers down here. We can't afford to re-import those cases from elsewhere.
The Foreign Office is now warning against all but essential travel to France, and that also applies to Monaco, Malta, the Turks and Caicos Islands and Aruba. The new measures kick in from 4 a.m. UK time on Saturday. If you do decide to travel, you'll face a 14-day quarantine when you return. As for why now, the Department of Transport says there's been a 66% increase in newly reported cases per 100,000 people in France since last Friday. For the Netherlands, it was up 52%. France has responded. French Junior European Affairs Minister Clement Beaune tweeted that there will be a reciprocal measure. These measures are anticipated to hurt the tourism industry on both sides of the Channel. Those with holidays booked are now weighing up whether to go or cancel, while many visitors in France face a race to get back to the UK. Those that run the Eurotunnel have already said they don't have the capacity to bring everyone home in time.
We're already pretty much fully booked tomorrow. This is peak season, summer holidays. People are returning on a Friday night to get back home. And so we just haven't got the space to take everybody who might suddenly want to come up to the coast. So what we're saying to people is amend your booking online. Make sure there's space before you travel to the terminal.
The Foreign Office hasn't advised UK visitors to leave immediately, but those who wish to avoid 2 weeks of self-isolation on their return now have less than 24 hours to get home. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Now, Ben is outside St Pancras International Station, obviously home to Eurostar. Morning, Ben. So, we know there's been a lot of people looking at the website, trying to book, trying to get back home to avoid quarantine.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and what a busy 24 hours it could be. Less than 24 hours for people there. The up to 500,000 British tourists currently in France right now. They've not got that much time to try and get back if they're to avoid those rules that, as you heard, come into force at 4 o'clock tomorrow. We've already heard from Eurotunnel. That is the company that brings people on coaches and buses and cars through the Channel Tunnel. They've told us simply do not turn up at the French side of the terminal if you do not have a booking or have not been able to amend your existing booking to get you on it. We know that service particularly busy, of course, because people felt maybe a little safer being able to stay inside their car or vehicle whilst making that crossing. We've also heard from some of the ferry companies and a suggestion that yes, if you're in northern France right now, getting to the ferry terminal about now might be okay. But remember, many will be driving up through France, so it will take them some time to get to those channel ports to get back to the UK. Here at St Pancras, of course, as you said, home to Eurostar, expected to be pretty busy. Those services already under some pressure as people found that they had fewer options to go away this summer. Now remember too, that advice from the Foreign Office changing so that it means that it's advising against all but essential travel. So it means that if you did decide to travel and did endure that quarantine, your travel insurance may not be valid. Big questions too if you were due to go there, and we'll try and answer some of those a little later with the travel expert Simon Calder about what it means for things like hotel bookings and if you've got an existing flight, for example. Because those flights are expected to operate, those hotels are open, it's unlikely that you will be able to get a refund. But at this point in the morning, with less than 24 hours until those new measures come into force, lots of questions and likely to be a lot of travel chaos.
Indeed. Ben, thanks very much.
Casinos, beauticians and soft play centres in England are among the venues being allowed to reopen from tomorrow as the government further eases some of the remaining coronavirus restrictions.
Indoor theatre, as well as live music and performances, can also resume, but with socially distanced audiences. There is a warning of a significant increase in fines for those breaking the rules. Jessica Parker has more.
Bowling alleys, skating rinks, casinos and soft play centres can reopen from tomorrow, as can indoor performance venues where audiences are socially distanced. Wedding receptions of up to 30 guests will be permitted, and the piloting of having spectators at a small number of sports events can resume. Beauty salons will also be allowed to offer treatments like facials and eyebrow threading, although alongside hairdressers, people providing close contact services are now being told to wear a Type 2 surgical face mask in addition to a visor. It's after 2 weeks ago, Boris Johnson postponed the easing of measures in England for at least a fortnight because of concerns about infection rates.
With those numbers creeping up, our assessment is that we should now squeeze that brake pedal in order to keep the virus under control.
But the government says the situation appears to have levelled off, although the changes won't apply in areas where local restrictions are in place, including large parts of the north. Meanwhile, fines for people who repeatedly don't wear face coverings in places where they're mandatory could be doubled for each offence, up to £3,200. And there are new on-the-spot fines for those hosting illegal gatherings like raves. Senior government sources say that penalty could go up to £10,000. Jessica Parker, BBC News.
Let's speak to our political correspondent Nick Eardley, who's in Westminster for us now. So, Nick, we heard the Boris Johnson quote just a moment ago about the squeezing on the brake pedal. People would be mindful. The government scientists were talking about how we're on the edge of how far we could go with the easing, and that was recently too. And yet, we have announcements about easing.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlie. Morning. I mean, so the view in government a couple of weeks ago is that there were some warnings about an increase in the number of positive tests that were coming back. They now think that's levelled off, so they can kind of take their foot off that brake pedal ever so slightly and open up some more of these venues that had been closed. There have, of course, been huge warnings about the future of things like theatres, about casinos, about bowling alleys, if they didn't get a chance to open pretty soon, which I think have been weighing heavily on the minds of ministers over the last couple of weeks as well. But as I say, there is that view that things are levelling off when it comes to the number of new cases of the virus. So the government is hoping that this kind of measured approach will work. But as you say, look, there's also the warning that when schools start to go back in England next month, potentially you could see some more increases, as not just because children are out and about, but because their parents are. Some people will be going back to work as well. So, you know, there's also a warning from the government that if there is another increase, then some of this could be reversed.
We need to talk about A-levels from yesterday as well, Nick. What we now know from looking through these statistics is that students from schools in the most deprived areas are the ones who've had their grades most downgraded. These are statistics from the breakdown of where those schools are. So where is the government's position on that?
Well, I mean, the government's still insisting that this was a robust system, that was fair. I've got to say, I think some of the pressure is going to increase over the next few days. There are some Tory MPs who are worried that it gives a really bad impression if, private schools are getting far more advantage from this than perhaps colleges and further education establishments, as these figures seem to suggest as well. Labour are saying that the government should be prepared to completely change its mind on this and adopt a model similar to the one that was eventually taken up in Scotland, which saw those teacher recommended grades embraced in full in Scotland. Ministers in England seem really reluctant to do that. We know the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has talked about that devaluing some of the results, but like in Scotland, there's a lot of pressure on the government over this and it doesn't seem to be going away.
Nick, for the moment, thank you.
People in Wales will be able to join together with 4 additional households to form one larger social bubble from next weekend. The move, announced by the First Minister, coincides with plans to allow up to 30 people to attend a meal following a wedding or a funeral indoors if social distancing can be maintained.
A further 90 million doses of 2 more experimental coronavirus vaccines have been secured by the UK government.
It means Britain now has 6 different vaccines on order. Here's more from our medical correspondent, Fergus Walsh.
There are nearly 30 coronavirus vaccines undergoing clinical trials and well over 100 more in laboratory development. The UK is set to have one of the world's biggest stockpiles. Advance orders have been placed for 340 million doses of 6 different vaccines. Most require 2 doses, but there should be enough for everyone in the UK to be injected 5 times over.
Most vaccine trials end in failure, even those that look promising at the early stages. So the government is hedging its bets, hoping that one of the candidate vaccines it's bought will be successful.
We don't know if any of these vaccine formats that we've acquired will actually work. There are no licensed vaccines for any human coronavirus. So our priority is to ensure that we have sufficient vaccine for the populations in the UK who are most at risk from coronavirus infection.
The latest deals are for 30 million doses of a vaccine being developed by a Belgian company, Janssen, and 60 million doses from a US biotech, Novavax. There are roughly 4 technologies being used for coronavirus vaccines, and the UK has deals covering each of them. None of the costs have been revealed. By the end of the year, there could be at least half a dozen different coronavirus vaccines in clinical trials in the UK. Members of the public are being encouraged to register interest online because without medical volunteers, we won't know if any of the vaccines actually works. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Heavy rain has caused flooding and disruption across the south of England, with a train becoming stranded and a major road closed.
Part of the M25 in Surrey has been shut and the Met Office has issued yellow thunderstorm warnings for the next 4 days in much of England and Wales.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.